All right, good day, everyone. Welcome to this third installment already of the Single Source, the product data podcast by PIMVendors.com. I'm Stefan Spankers. I'm the co-founder of PIMVendors.com, and today we are joined by Helen Grimster, the Director of Product Marketing at Syndigo, which is a good thing because we are going to talk about syndication. Today's topic is product data, marketplaces, and DSA, digital shelf analytics. And I think we're going to cover a lot of ground today with both the developments in the AI space, recent developments in the Syndigo product offering that are timely, but also the good old world of definitions of different terms. Maybe to give some context, PIMVendors.com helps customers with their product data challenges. That, of course, includes the syndication or publication part where you distribute your product data across all the different internal and external challenges. Marketplaces, Amazon, Bol.com, Local Heroes are just one of those channels, or probably multiple channels, especially in Europe when you have a different Amazon store or a different Amazon channel per geography or per language. So there's even a different channel for Germany, for France, for the Netherlands, for UK, and every store needs their own feed. That is definitely going to be part of the conversation today. I've launched a marketplace that I sold before starting PIMVendors.com. So I know a thing or two about onboarding suppliers and product data to marketplaces. And I've been an active seller on both Amazon and Bol.com, the local Dutch Amazon variant, I'd say, as well. So we'll definitely go a bit deeper into that. And yeah, of course, maybe Helen, do a quick intro and give some background
Sure.
on what you bring.
Hi, yeah, I'm Helen Grimster. I'm Director of Products Experience Marketing here at Syndigo. If you don't know Syndigo, we cover everything, the whole product content lifecycle, sort of from master data through PIM, syndication, digital shelf, all the way through, and that side of things. My background is I've worked for a number of the different PIM and MDM vendors, and prior to working at Syndigo, I was at Gartner covering PIM, MDM, and a bit of digital shelf analytics. So this is a timely discussion. So it's something I'm really quite interested about. And obviously for me, it's thinking about the importance of having good product data to do all of this cool stuff once you're ready to let your product data out into the big wide world. So I'm really happy to be here talking about this today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Helen. It does start with that product data, right? I don't think that we have to rehash the previous episodes, but it is good to touch that. Product data, good quality product data is the foundation on which the whole enrichment and publication syndication workflow is built. Garbage in is garbage out still in 2026. AI does help, but doesn't change that first principle. You have to have that good quality data in place. And it is, I think, still one of the main factors used for all these different marketplaces to get you higher in their search rankings or even in the buy box, as it is called on the Amazon marketplaces. Maybe if you could give some background on the different marketplaces that are out there and maybe how they use product data in their listings and how to rank products.
I mean, I think as we've seen, there's been a massive shift from when you're publishing and the performance. I think it's making sure that you are ready for that. And there's so many different marketplaces out there. I mean, obviously in Europe, we're probably more complex than perhaps our friends across in America, because we have the complexity of languages. We have the complexity of different, as you've already mentioned, different sites for different Amazon and so on. And then also we have the complexity of more localized ones and so on. But I think it's really that what's changed is that need to have just publishing isn't enough anymore. And I think we've seen the fact that you have quality assigned to your product listings, and it's far more about your performance now. I mean, and we can always talk about, oh, you can activate or publish a listing, but it's up to the marketplace who decides whether the customers ever see it. So it's a different way of going to market now. And I think a lot of the time people think once the job is done, once you've sent your content, but what really matters now is how the marketplace scores it. So making sure that you're meeting their standards, which of course do change. They're better than they used to be. I think when we look back maybe 4 or 5 years, Amazon was changing nearly every day what they were looking for, or different sort of attributes that they wanted, the way that they wanted them done, and so on. We've seen that maybe settle down, but obviously new marketplaces coming in. And I mean, we can talk about marketplaces from the traditional ones, but of course we do have social media as a marketplace, and the growth of, I mean, I'm too old for this, I have to admit, but for buying on TikTok or Facebook or all of those, bits that I don't understand, Instagram. So of course it's again making sure that you're ready for that you've got the right content. And that means that there's so many different things to manage. And the market has really changed. So it's not enough just to manage your product data internally for traditionally publishing to your own website. You need to understand how your product data is going to be scored, ranked, and displayed once it hits the marketplace. And that's a whole new world that not going to say we didn't care about, but maybe, as I say, if we go back 10 years and we've all been in this business far too long, that's a totally different evolution from maybe from the beginning of PIM. And I think what we're looking at now is much more around that product experience and all the intersections of publishing that data to these different channels. And then, of course, then we can also touch on the fact that we now have new ones from if you're publishing out to the up and coming agentic ChatGPT and so on. We'll get into that a bit more detail, but syndication is just one tiny part of this. And syndication, if you think about it, is actually evolved far more. I would say it's much better to talk about sharing that data, because syndication, you maybe just think about traditionally publishing to marketplaces. So I think there's a real shift into thinking about the performance rather than pushing the button and letting it go. That's not enough anymore. You need to make sure that that your products are landing with those marketplaces. I don't know if you can add any more to that. I mean, that's how I see it, and that's
Yeah.
how I see it's changed massively.
Yeah. No, I think that's super important to not just see how it is, well, was done, but also take a look at the future and see how that is developing. And I mean, I'm not selling on TikTok or Instagram either, but that is definitely an important
Oh,
channel for many of us. And agentic commerce is adding a new layer on top of that or next to that, depending on how you look at it.
mm,
But let's start with the basics, maybe, right? So I think everyone that has the ambition of selling on marketplaces or is already selling on marketplaces knows that it's not just about hitting that big green button and publishing it to that channel. That's, yes, it's the first stage gate. You need to make sure you map your products to the correct product data model of the marketplace. They are indeed different per marketplace. So Amazon has different requirements than a standard Miracle
mm,
marketplace or than your local hero. Um, it has changes over time. So they change their product data model, add attributes that you then have to fix. And of course, if you want to be visible on all the different marketplaces, you need to have translations in place and need to make sure that those translations make sense. And it's costly to have all your products translated in a, well, let's say near native or maybe even native speaking translation. But that's just the basics, as you said. That's just getting it out there. Then you get
mm,
to the winning the buy box or winning the search category or the search game, where if people are searching for your product, let's say you're
right.
selling tents for camping, you got to make sure that you are top of that list or somewhere on the first page. And to get to that first page, and I don't know the numbers by heart, but I think at least in the US, most searches start on Amazon now instead of starting on Google or, of course, on an LLM nowadays. Still, I
Yeah.
think most of them start on Amazon. So you want to be part of that search listing and not just be stuck on page 8 or 9 because no one will get to there. Um, So to win that search game, to win the buy box, if you are selling, the same product that others are selling as well, you need to have those. You need to have more than the basics in place. Just being present on a marketplace is something different than winning the marketplace. And I think that's where the digital shelf analytics come into play as well, to make sure that you get feedback on what is working and what is not. Now, if we are looking at that complexity of making sure you cover all your bases on all these different marketplaces, how does that even work in a PIM? And how can a PIM help you do that?
I mean, we've already sort of said that you need to have that foundational layer, but it's being able to manage that complexity at scale. And I think that's, where you have a PIM that can allow you to take, I would say, with what you want to call it, your standard context or whatever that is, and be able to easily create multiple versions of that content, be able to ensure that you are you're getting the right uh, tone of voice, or the different things that each of those different marketplaces or channel needs. And we all know that managing at scale is so difficult if you don't have something behind there, because you don't know if you are meeting the requirements of each individual marketplace. And then, of course, if you think about, maybe you have a product catalog of 20,000 SKUs, if you're really you're replicating those out, it could end up as 200,000 versions of those, because you've got to have one for Amazon in France or Amazon in Germany, and they've got to be different. Or if you are selling, across into different things like Wayfair and Zalando and all of these other maybe different things that are maybe more specific, they have different requirements as well. Managing that at scale without something like a PIM is a really difficult and complex task. I mean, I know people tried to do it with Excel, but as we've just said, those standards change. How do you ensure that you're keeping on top of that? How do you know that you're missing something? So that's why having something like a PIM to help you manage that content, check that you've got completeness, check that what you're putting in there meets those marketplaces requirements, is so important. And it's that validation, because you don't want to keep missing when you push that button out because you've missed something or you've put the wrong thing in there. So you need to have something to support you in that. And particularly as we are seeing the changes in having more and more channels that have different requirements. And we haven't even talked about the fact that if we are going to be selling through agentic commerce, are they going to have their own standards? Are they going to have their own formats in the same way that Amazon does? So there's that to think about as well. So I think you need the PIM as the backbone to be able to support all that complexity, and also to be able to do that at scale, to be able to understand what that is, and realize that doing that without a tool is going to be incredibly difficult. So obviously, PIM is going to be providing that foundational layer, and also, as you said, for mapping and so on, maybe whether that sits in syndication or not, because this is where it gets complicated. What exactly is a PIM anymore? I mean, or are we moving more into product experience management where it's all interconnected? Another discussion to have. So really, but the PIM is providing the foundational product information that you need to be able to actually push that content out where you need it.
Yeah, no, that is true. And I think we call it publication and a stage gate, right? But that's only where it starts, right? So that is more of a verb than just a stage gate, because just publishing it means there's a single state version of your product live now. You now need to maintain it and update it, and there's changes in your collection, or you are updating features, or there's a replacement part, or whatever happens. Your catalog is not static. So that means all the different recipients, all the different channels where your catalog goes, should not be static as well. And then we come back to exactly what you're saying. Like, it's not just, you cannot manage that with an Excel and just hope for the best. You need to have a process in place. You need to have the tools that support you with that process. And that last bit of making sure that you fit all the different requirements for all those different marketplaces, whether that is translation requirements, or I don't know, Zalando might ask different attributes than than Amazon does, and you need to enrich
Yeah.
those attributes just on that specific channel. How do you do that efficiently? Who is responsible? Who do you get? Who checks whether that is done or not? Because maybe you change something, or the marketplace changes their attribute requirements, and suddenly you're no longer on the first
The
position, but
first
you're
thing.
somewhere
Yeah.
down page 5. Um, I think what we see now with the birth of a lot of AI tools, that this is a process that is much more easier now, or you can do that with much less overhead. But still, you need to have a process in place and not just see this as a one-time thing that you
Yeah.
just hit publish and it's done, right? It's a maintenance process that is attached to it as well.
And I think the bit that we've forgotten, of course, as well, is that the complete whether how complete that that record is. Because if you have something missing, if you are missing a vital piece of information, or if it's inconsistent, it's still I mean, maybe it is accepted by the marketplace, but maybe you have missed something really important. And so even though you think, oh, I've done a great job here, you may have missed something really important, and that would mean that the shoppers would lose trust in your products, and then you may get things like lower abandoned carts, lower conversions, returns, not just lower content scores. So even though you think you may have ticked all the boxes, you need to keep checking that even though you've hit that publish button, is that actually driving the conversion? Are you actually getting the sales from what you've put forward? Because we know, and I mean, we have a research that we do every year, but we know that most consumers will say that inaccurate or incomplete product information will negatively affect how they perceive a brand. So content quality is so much part of the buying decision, not just the listing setup. So I think we can talk about, but that's why having something like a PIM behind what you're doing can check that, can verify that you are complete, or you're meeting, for example, there's a certain length of character in a field, or that richness of content, or that you've got the images and so on. So I think it's making sure that, yes, you've pushed the button, and yes, you think you've done it correctly, but is it actually landing? And I still think it comes down to, I mean, as we always talking about that data quality. Again, it's even probably more important when you're managing multiple versions of your SKU wherever you're publishing it to, because that you get it wrong, and you're just literally going to keep falling down those rankings. You're not going to go up, or you might just fall off completely. So again, it's another area to be thinking about. Have I got this right? Because you are going to have to keep going back and reworking it, because people's taste change, and there may be a sudden surge in a particular trend. We all know that happens, or the way that you've described something, that word is no longer the right thing, so you want to be checking the sentiment and so on. So it's not a once and done, and I think particularly with marketplaces, you need to be on top of that. So it's a definite ongoing task. And actually, AI can help you there if you are seeing something that's changing. For example, where you perhaps used to say retro, but now we've changed it to being old style or something like that. You can check across your entire catalog and find and replace. Something like that is really good for AI, using AI to do that and so on. So I think there's definitely ways that you can really shape and improve the content that you're publishing using AI. But still, as you said, you need to have a human there to double check it. But things like this, it's being able to give you that start for it as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how that is currently changing, and I think the early movers have an advantage here, where if you're an early adopter of adding AI, either as still with in a process where there's a human in the loop that checks and validates, or just as a um, independent agent to do all the additions that you need to get your data quality in order for each of these different marketplaces and their different requirements. I think there's another arena to win here, and we're going to get through that in the agentic commerce section for sure. But even in applying AI to the existing processes that are there, and I do want to shout out to tools like Valuna that uses AI to do context aware. All AIs are context aware, but also culturally context aware translations, where even the differences between, let's say, Dutch and Flemish are being
Mm.
taken into account, or it even takes into account the regional differences between the generation of relevant inspirational shoots, right? So you get, I don't know, products with seascapes as backgrounds in the Netherlands, but in Switzerland and Austria, you get mountains and lakes as backgrounds for your inspirational shoots.
That's cool.
Those types of
Yeah.
tweaks, yeah, that's super cool. And of course, like as a human photographer, you would think about that, but then a human photographer and the model and all taking all that time, you would not add those inspirational shoots, or just do that for the highest quality, most expensive type products. If you just ask ChatGPT, or you have a call from your PIM to Nano Banana, Gemini, to add images, you would do this without the cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
But there are already tools that take two or three steps further, take that through two or three steps further, and do it with that cultural sensitivity. So you have that very specific, tailored content that not just sort of ticks all the boxes, because I think that's sort of stage one. You tick all the boxes, have all
Yeah.
the attributes there, but takes that to stage two or stage three, like over complete, culturally sensitive descriptions and attributes. Now, say you have that listing there in place. Now you get your sales performance, right? So you see whether you get any sales at all. You can also check the Amazon Marketplace yourselves, and search for your own products or search for your own categories and see where your products are listed. How does digital shelf analytics help, and how is it integrated into this process and dashboarding of feedback loops to provide the right information back to the category manager or the team inside? How does that work?
I mean, I think that, digital shelf analytics, it's a kind of, oh, what do you actually mean by that? What's that?
Yeah.
What's different about that? And I think that's probably been the biggest shift from, what we've had previously. We used historically product data was create, publish, done. That was it. You just was like, oh, it's gone, it's out there, not that we don't care, but it's, we've done our job, we've ticked that box. But what we're looking at with that closed loop feedback of is around, we've created it, we've distributed it, we're observing what's happening out there. We're watching. We're looking to see how is it converting, what's happening, and then we go back with that. We can improve it, and then we republish it. So having something like digital shelf allows you to see, what's converting, giving you those dashboards into what's happening out there in the big wide world when you've actually pressed that publish button. And
Right.
it's really thinking about. I mean, you know, I would say that publish is the beginning. You've got there, you've done that, but you want to make sure that what you've published is landing and that you are getting that conversion from. But I think that if you are running the digital shelf, you're creating a cycle. And if you can get that insight into, you know, is that product missing being converted because I'm missing an attribute, or there isn't a right image, or that kind of thing, that loop back, that feedback allows you to be stronger and be able to create better content and so on. So that analytics piece, whilst it sounds really quite dull, makes it much easier for you to see, is my product actually performing? Is it converting? And you really, if you put them together, so for me, obviously, this is really thinking about it from a PXM or product experience management point of view. If you link together your PIM, your syndication, and your digital shelf analytics together, you can actually see what's happening on the shelf, understand why your product isn't performing, and fix it quickly. And I think that's the important thing. You don't wait for like a couple of weeks or to the end of the season to see, oh, I've got left with all this stock. You can see instantly what's happening and looking at whether it's been abandoned or whether it's returned. And we all know that, sometimes if the description's not quite right or the sizing's not quite right, you can jump in there and understand straight away. And I think it takes out some of the guesswork. And I think that, before you just didn't know, if you got that loop coming back in and you can see, what's happening, you can actually optimize your content straight away and therefore not miss out on those sales. So that analytics is really helping you with your performance and your conversion. It's, I think it's a natural progression, and it might sound like a nice to have. And of course, in these times, sometimes it's one of the things that people are not wanting to invest in. But for me, it really helps you get more value from where you're publishing your product information. But that loop back, yes, of course, it's also about improving the performance of your current catalog, but also it's informing you what are people looking for. Maybe you've got 3 jumpers and they're red, white, and blue, but is somebody searching for green in that particular style? Maybe I should be thinking about adding a green one to my next season. So sometimes it's giving you information for thinking about what you can do with your products moving forward. So it's not just for the now, it's also for the future. And I think sometimes people forget that the information they're getting back can really help them look for trends and so on. And you can see, for particularly in maybe those companies that are much more responsive and have more collections and do drops every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, they are really, things like analytics can really help them follow the trends and be fast and help them really tap into things that are happening out there. So even though the analytics may be just about performance, they are so much more. So I get quite excited about analytics because who doesn't love a bit more data?
Yeah, but it is about closing the loop, right? And being on top of your product catalog, because I think in today's world, you don't have the time. Well, you can choose whether you want to wait until the end of the season to adjust your offering, but you want to have that real time visibility, because you can then steer and update. I mean, within an hour, usually, and fix what is wrong. And it's not indeed the stage gates or the whether you are online or not. It's actually testing, like, is this moving me up in the rankings on the search page, or is this moving me up in the rankings on the buy box? Having that in an actual overview instead of having to go through each of these listings manually one by one, or using spreadsheet imports and exports. I think that's sort of making it actionable is sort of the key here, where you can really have sort of a control tower available when it comes to your product data on all the different channels.
And I think it's important to think about which metrics you're going to track. You can't track everything. I think it's really thinking about the ones that make sense for you. I mean, we've mentioned search rankings. Of course, that's important. Thinking about how often you appear in the share of search. Again, something you might want to think about. And we've mentioned talking about your content health score, making sure that you're keeping that up to date and so on. You might be thinking about, having that digital shelf can improve your content health. And of course, that means conversions. And obviously, that's another thing that you want to track, because that helps you with your sales performance and make sure that you are getting that correct. And I think what we're also seeing now is maybe a little bit of a change and a shift with people looking at ratings and reviews and the sentiments around that, and whether you've got positive or negative sentiment, because you want to make sure that people are, they like the product and they're sharing how great it is. And also, if you do get that negative comments in there, can you use that to improve what you're doing and action that? So I think we're moving a little bit further from just pure content on the page, but more around user generated content and how you can leverage that within your digital shelf to move that forward. Also thinking about what are your competitors doing, and you want to look at benchmarking there. So I think, and the whole point of the digital shelf analytics is to bridge that gap between product data and revenue. And it's whether your content is actually working or whether you've just published it. And I think that's a massive difference of, it's not just once and done anymore. And I think we're seeing here at Syndigo that ratings and reviews are now one of the strongest ranking and conversion signals, which is one of the reasons why we now have our own ratings and reviews tool built into our offering. But it's really important for extending out, how well you land, not just obviously in marketplaces on the PDP, and being able to see that, because if you're like me and maybe a lot of other people, you trust other customers more than you do the actual product content. You want to see, does this skirt fit? How does it fit? Is it too long? I mean, if I'm short, I don't want something that's too long. But if I'm tall, I'm like, great. If it's too long for the average person, that's the one for me. So it's not always negative. It's how do you take that further? And I think it's not just about the lovely glossy images anymore. That user generated content is something really important in making sure that you're landing. And that's also something that you might want to be thinking about blending back in from your digital shelf analytics. So it's a definite shift from just the pure product data to bringing in a lot more of that content that perhaps we didn't care about so much previously. And I think sometimes everybody thinks a negative review is a bad review. It can absolutely not be. But again, I'm far more likely to buy a product that's got 200 reviews than something that's got 2. So I think we can all see that that's changing. And I mean, it's all about influencing not just the rankings, but the trust in your product. And again, as I said, the reviews also tell you if your data's wrong. So if it's not as described or it's missing something and so on. And I think that's also a product data problem. So you can really see how having this feedback and loop backing can really improve your conversion and also your brand or your products and so on. So I think it's an ever evolving and ever moving space.
No, that's indeed true. And I think I'm not sure when that shift happened. I used to like not look at reviews at all, or see them as a nice to have. And now it's exactly as you described. It's the first thing. Well, it's the first thing you're scrolling towards. Is like, oh, how is this scoring versus, and what are the people saying about this, and is it actually useful versus? Oh, it's interesting how that. Do you see how that actually can work cross-platform and get all that feedback into one overview? Because I think it's the same as with where does your product score on the different search
Yeah.
rankings. You can track that across 20 channels. Same with the
Yes,
feedback. Like it's
absolutely.
very difficult.
And in a lot of cases, the ratings and reviews that you have, say, for example, you're a cosmetics company, you may be pulling those ratings and reviews in from multiple different sites. So if you are selling your products on a large department store, as well as on your own website, as well as on a marketplace, those reviews are published to all of them. So you can gather more from each of them. And so you can absolutely use those to drive conversion. I think sometimes people think, oh, the ratings and reviews are tied to just one particular site. Absolutely not. Those reviews tend to go across everywhere that you are selling your products, should you have them. And it's really, like you, I never used to care. But now, of course, you search by, have this got a 5-star review? You're looking for those products that have got the better review. So it's really important as we move forward to think about the information that you're gathering there. And of course, the images. And I know I'm not TikTok images, Instagram images, those are all being embedded into reviews as well. What people are saying about your products, those, how people are wearing it, and maybe a lot of the fashion brands are as worn by you. So they will, if you've taken a photo of you wearing that particular product, I do like to look to see how other people, what it looks like on a real person rather than just a wonder. I mean, it's nice to see what it looks like on a model, but we all know that's been put together, but it's nice to see how somebody else has styled it. So I think we're seeing a definite change from that kind of thing. I mean, maybe we've gone slightly off piste here, but it's very important to think about all of that content driving how you move forward and so on. So again, I think that's something that you might want to be tracking.
No, but it is the next stage, right? I mean, if you've looked at the Zalando app recently, like it's almost TikTok, but then just fashion,
Mm.
right? It's images and video content of influencers, not entirely normal people, but at least slightly more normal than the runway models wearing clothes that they're selling. And it's inspirational. You see how they combine that with different pieces. And you can sort of create your own style based on that. But I mean, you want to get that data in, even if it's
Yes.
on an external platform, because you can then publish that. I mean, if it's content that you own, of course, you can't just like
Mm.
repost or reshare content without attribution, or maybe not at all. But you want to have that user generated content and actually share and make that available on maybe just your own web shop or
Yep.
on other channels as well, because having a review in German on the German Amazon just sitting there, yeah, it makes a lot of sense if you had that review available in Dutch and French and English as well. The
And of
value is the
course,
same, the
that's what
information is the same.
you can get those translated as well so that you can do that. And then obviously you can sort your reviews by language and all of that kind of thing. And I think the other part that we're seeing, and obviously last week we bought a company here at Syndigo to cover off dynamic social proof, which is also, you've got your ratings and reviews, which is maybe more static content. But now people are looking to see, how many people have got this in their basket? What, is this trending? Is it number one in this particular category? Because we've all got FOMO. We all want to have the latest and greatest. We want to have the most popular, or we can look at the stock levels, and those are dynamically generated. So that's social proof. So you've got those cues to sort of say what's popular, what's been in everyone's basket. I mean, yes, of course they can increase conversion, but only if the underlying data and availability are accurate. So we're seeing another shift into much more dynamically generated content to drive that conversion. And they're all sitting inside this product experience management as we extend far more into the commerce space than we probably ever did before. So I think it's really the whole user generated content and that social proofing is perhaps next generation to what I was used to when I first got into this particular space. So it's very exciting and interesting. That's probably what I'd say.
Helen, do you think that the importance of reviews is going to diminish after AI helps increase the sort of baseline of product content? Because what I see, and I was shopping for something recently and I was checking the reviews to see how people were actually using the product. And the reason I was checking those reviews and using the reviews to compare different models of the same product, the reason I was using the reviews was because that the product data from the vendor or from the retailer were just so static and I don't want to say shitty, but shitty that you couldn't really make boring, fine. Well, low quality because I couldn't make a decision based on, like it said, okay, so it was a multi-tool, and I was comparing 3 different versions of the same, slightly different variants of the same multi-tool. The question, of course, is why are there 3 different variants of roughly the same multi-tool? That's anyway, but I was comparing them, and then the product listing just says, has a corkscrew, has a blade, has a pair of scissors, but it's not operationalized and not saying like, hey, if you are this type of person, then probably this is the best fit. Or hey, if this is so that is what you would have wanted, right? What I would have wanted. Let's speak for myself. With AI now, you can embed that in the actual product description. And I wouldn't have needed the reviews to make that comparison.
I mean, I don't know. I still think, yes, you can definitely have stronger product and people will be drawn to that particular page. But I do think people still want to look at what other people say about that product. I think it may, if you enrich and you have better, stronger content, absolutely far more likely to land. But I think people want to trust what other customers are saying, and that's still part of that whole journey. It may not, I think it's going to continue to be important. I think people are not stupid about AI, that they know that there's a lot of content being generated, and they might want to just make sure and double check that what's being said actually lands once people have bought that. But I agree, sometimes it's forgotten. How do you actually do that comparison of 3 different products that essentially look the same? There does need to be more thought put into that. And I do think that's where, we're going to see much more around running, we touched on agentic commerce, but around, agents to be able to help you and to be able to unpick that, of course. But again, if they don't have great product content in the first place, they need that to drive that engagement. So yes, it may become less important, the reviews, but I don't know, because I still think we trust other people and how they are using it more than perhaps the content. I still think that's moved forward. But together, I think that's the ultimate, is to have all of the information on that product page that can really help your customer engage and choose that product. So the PDP itself is going to give you need to have everything to drive the conversion. It no longer is it enough just to have one image and a couple of feature points. We all know that moving forward. So it's definitely evolving.
It's raising the bar, basically, right? It's like e-commerce 5 or 10 years ago was like, oh, this is great. You can buy stuff online, and people were doing it. And now it's like, if you would see a PDP that was designed 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you would like, oh, this is such a shady web shop. I would never buy something here. And that's just because the bar has been raised, right? The floor has been raised. And just to be considered as a web shop nowadays, you need to have so much more Such a rich experience is what you need. And I think with AI, you're basically now also raising the ceiling, right? You can create images and videos of the product, maybe 360 views even. I'm not fully up to speed when it comes to those tools and what is world leading there, but we're raising the ceiling at the same time as we're raising the floor. Now, we touched on agentic commerce, and last week we touched on AI because you can't talk about
Yeah.
product content without talking about AI nowadays. Um, we just spoke about the impacts of AI on this specific part, on the publication or syndication to marketplaces. One of the newest sort of channels that we're already seeing, and there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of revenue streams that the different LLM vendors want to unlock with agentic commerce, or maybe first chat-based commerce and then
Mm.
fully agentic commerce. What do you see on your end in the developments in that space? Have you ever
I
bought
mean,
something using ChatGPT?
I've looked, I've done research. I mean, we now have AEO, agent optimized content. So we're now moving, into a whole another category and another 3-letter acronym. So we
Right.
are, first of all, it's GEO, now we're into AEO. And I do think, when you talk to people that have got teenagers, or a lot of people, that's their first thing they go to is ChatGPT to find out more about it, to look up and get the recommendations. And we know that there's already been, people trying that out. There's obviously a particular format for OpenAI to publish your product data to. Again, another format, and I suspect that we'll see the same with Perplexity. We'll see the same with Claude. Maybe they'll. I mean, we could hope that they all come up with a common format, but we know that's not going to be the case. So you're going to have to manage that. But I do think it's going to grow. I think at the moment it's still very much in its infancy, and that we're going to see. Obviously we've seen people already starting to use it. I mean, we were just talking before this about Walmart and how they've started to use this, and there's a very interesting article about it isn't happening quite as they hoped it would. But of course, we're at the very beginning of this. We're at the very beginning of how do I get my product information into a totally new channel with different expectations and so on, and being able to ensure that you represent your product or brand in the correct way there. So I do think that is we're, as I say, at the very beginning of it. But if we were talking about this time next year, it will be a totally different story about how people are shopping, how you need to make sure that you have the correct content out there, you have great images, you've got the great reviews. How do you land, if they're going to recommend 10 products, how do you land in that 10 recommended products? There's going to be a whole new way of thinking about how do I share my catalog to these new ways of buying. And I think this year is going to be the year, and we're already seeing it because we would love to talk about agentic commerce. It's going to be the year of agentic commerce. And I suspect if you were at Shop Talk next week, which of course a lot of people are, it will be all about agentic, and there will be agentic PXM, and which of course is the future, agents helping you do that. So I think it's really exciting because it means that product information management and that need is not going away. It's just evolving and generating more interest. And it's probably more important than ever because you need to have that consistency, because it's going to be even quicker, and you'll press a button and it'll be straight out there into your LLMs or wherever it's going to. And I don't think there will be the validation in the same way perhaps that we are used to previously. So I think it's going to be a really exciting year. We're right, as I say, right at the very beginning of what's happening. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about what we've seen
Well,
coming back from Walmart already.
yeah, well, let's touch on that later. I think what we're seeing now is those visions we had of personalized commerce or personalized travel experiences. That is now finally starting to happen,
Mm.
and I think it's unfortunately for the e-commerce platforms, it's them. They are not owning this interaction, right? They are not
Well,
the interface for these interactions. It's the chat interface currently. It is the model. It is it is ChatGPT, which I think is interesting. I'm not sure if that is going to stay that way, but as you mentioned, like many people start their browsing and discovery experience in ChatGPT. Do
Mm.
you actually need to leave that interface to buy something? Mm, I
I
can't
don't. I
speak for
mean,
myself.
that is going to be the key. That is going to be, can I not just check out one item, but can I build a cart? But also, can I build a cart from multiple different places? Because you won't just be shopping from one retailer. And that's what's going to change everything. And I think it's going to be,
Yeah.
as we said about building a look, like Zalando, for example. Somebody's
Mhm.
built a look, it won't be the same brand. Okay, maybe they bought it all through Zalando, but that's going to be changing, as in you may have something that you've bought from one particular retailer, you bought a pair of shoes from somebody else, you may be like even be buying accessories from another one, being able to build that look and then be able to pull that all together and check it out from within chat gpt, for example. That's what the future's going to be like. It's going to be a totally different shopping experience. How are
Yeah.
we going to support that moving forward? And how are we going to make sure that our products are part of the recommended look or whatever it's going to do with inside those particular search agents and so on? So I think that is going to be so interesting about that whole purchase journey. Of course, how is that going to happen? How are you going to be able to buy 4 items from 4 different retailers or 4 different brands, but pay for it in one transaction? So I think that is going to be the real interesting part. Of course, it's that recommendation part, making sure that your products land and being open to the fact that you may not sell a complete look anymore, which of course is the dream. You want everybody to buy that, but that's not reality. It's very rare that someone would buy top to toe from one particular brand. So I think that's going to be fascinating. How do you tag your products to make sure that they get chosen? So the the AEO is going to be so interesting about how do you make sure that agent picks yours and puts yours forward. It's not just about buying one product anymore. Of course, that's how it's starting, but it's bringing that all together. And I think that's going to be the massive change in how people shop as we move forward. And I don't know if everybody's thought about that yet.
It is interesting how frictionless that can become, and probably within months instead of next year. I'm very curious how
Mm.
that is going to evolve. The example that you gave is actually very good because I had exactly this experience on Zalando where they recommended an outfit. I saw an outfit. I thought, hey, I like this outfit. They didn't have the shirt in my size, so I got stuck. Um, I tried to search for there is no product number. Fashion is, I think, overall pretty bad when it comes to sort of
Yep.
product names and consistent SKUs or product numbers across different outlets. Like even, yeah, without naming the brand, like it was an internationally well-known brand, but they didn't have a consistent naming convention or coding convention across the different channels that they operated. So here we go. They need a PIM. Um, but anyway, I then had to reverse image search the shirt to then get to a different outlet that was actually I'm based in the Netherlands, but it bought it from a German web shop, hoping it was the same because it did look a bit different because they
Ah,
used their own shoot images, where the Zalando ones were, I think, from the brand, and they used their own models for that local German shop. So it was still a bit of I crossed my fingers hoping that it would fit. That's for one, but also that it was actually the same shirt. Um, and that was, I think, I don't want to admit it, but I think maybe an hour of reverse image searching and comparing and finding the right. Like, I really wanted the shirt. I mean,
you definitely wanted that shirt if you're
small
spending that
confession,
amount
but
on
yeah,
it.
no, but that is maybe, yeah, that was a very high friction buyer journey, to say the least. But it could have been one agentic conversation,
Yeah,
right? So me talking to the agent saying, "Hey, just get me this shirt on the whatever platform works because I don't actually care."
yeah.
Very curious how that is going to evolve also in the sort of, I mean, we have dark kitchens now, right? So is Zalando just going to be a dark operator for dark warehouse for all different fashion items, and there's just going to be, yeah, an API that sells or ships products back and forth? I'm I'm curious how
It's going
that
to
is
be
going to.
interesting, isn't it? We just don't know yet. And
Yeah.
is that how people are going to want to shop? And of course, the interesting part is we're talking all about digital shelf, which we're kind of ignoring the fact that we do still have bricks and mortar. Does that
Right.
mean it's going to go away? And of course, you still need to think about, we're getting all excited about the future, but you know, my parents and people of a certain generation are still, they're not going to go to ChatGPT. They're not going to use these agents. So we've still got that more traditional route to market. So it's balancing. How do you do all of this? Online isn't everybody's way of shopping.
True.
I think if we spoke to, I think, maybe if you are of a certain age, you are used to looking in ChatGPT rather than going to Google or Amazon. But then it's a generational thing as well. So it's going to take a while for all of that to filter through. So it's, again, how do you juggle all of these different routes to market? So it's going to be fascinating about, the way that you're talking about it means that we're kind of seeing the end of people actually going out physically to buy um, their their clothes or whatever. But if you look at some of the research, that's not happening. People are actually going out more because they want to actually physically see something. So I think whilst we're talking about the digital shelf, we can't actually still forget the physical shelf as well. So it's going to be really interesting how this evolves in the next, 6 to 12 months.
Not yet, at least.
Not yet. I think
No.
it's interesting that things are changing, and we did touch on Walmart briefly, but that hasn't been, and it was reported this week that their Instacart, or is it Instacart they've called it? I can't remember exactly what they called it. But their options there, it hasn't landed as well as they'd hoped it would. So I think we're still at the very edge of this happening. As I said, give it another 6 months, it will have changed again, because we are obviously in this era. So agentic, it's round the corner, but again, and we're going to keep coming back to it. If you fail, if your digital shelf fails, it's not product problems, it's data problems. So
Yeah.
even if you're investing in all of this cool, sexy, exciting stuff, none of it's going to work if your product data is not correct. So I think for me, that still holds true. I mean, we can get super excited about it, but if you don't have that stable thing in a PIM, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I I hate to come back to that point every time,
I
but it
hate to
is,
come
of
back
course.
because it's so exciting.
No, I mean, um, it is true, right? And I think that's also something we're seeing with our customers and clients lately, that because of all the fancy stuff happening in AI, you need to have good quality data in place. We're actually seeing a huge spike in interest on boring topics like master data management and product data
Master
modeling.
data management's never boring, by the way. It's always very exciting. But
Sorry.
yes, I get your
Yes.
gist.
I'm boring between, yeah, you get it. No,
Anyway,
I get it. You can wake me up at 2 a.m. to discuss product data and master data challenges, but most people would rather go back to sleep. Regarding that, we do see that in the market that they are turning to this to get that fixed. That is something that's the foundation. You need to get that foundation layer in place, and then you can start doing all the fancy stuff with AI and all the other agentic stuff as well. That's a great way to end this episode, I would say. Back to basics. Fix your product data first.
yeah,
Garbage in is garbage out. Thank you so much for joining us
it's
today.
a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks to the audience for sticking with us. Please do follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, because we are a true podcast with a live listing on all those different platforms. We're not just live on LinkedIn or YouTube today, but we do have a regular show there. So if you're interested in this, follow us there, and you'll get an update every time we have a new episode out. There will be more episodes. Next week, we'll have an interview with Susan Walsh on, again, garbage in product data. So, hey, it's a returning theme. And I think, Helen, you'll be back in 2 weeks. So I hope to
Think
see
so.
you then.
Yeah.
And I hope
Thank
to
you
see the
so
audience.
much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.